Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Jeff Kaufman, and I'm here to present tonight's great presentation, the one where the project blew up, when bad project events happen to good people. With us is Kelly Schactler and Paul Thompson tonight. First thing we're going to do is get rid of the negative vibes first. So here are our program meeting guidelines. I like to minimize distractions, so please turn off or silence your cell phone and other electronic devices. If you have to take a call, please step away from the presentation. If your video and internet lag, consider using audio only. And please do not interrupt the speaker. When interacting, use business speak. And be respectful of time, be punctual. If you must leave early, please do so quietly. And also please mute your microphone when not talking. And be focused. Stay focused on the presentation. When posting questions or comments, prioritize the Q&A board over the chat window. Now, let's go have some fun. Tonight's agenda at 6:30, which you're experiencing right now, we'll have our opening and announcements. At 6:40 starts the keynote with Kelly and Paul. At 7:45, we'll have audience Q&A, and at 8 o'clock, we'll have our raffle and closing. But first, some chapter announcements of upcoming events. Now, this Monday, we're having a PMO roundtable, PMO culture. Various things. Have you established and maintained your PMO culture? What makes your PMO tick? Please join us at that event. It's at 5:30 on May 24th and 1.5 PDUs. And as with all our events, this event is free, but please RSVP as space is limited. Our next PMO roundtable on the PMO BOC is going to be on June 28th, again from 5:30 to 7 o'clock, and it'd be 1.5 PDUs, and talk about the book of knowledge for PMOs. And finally, and this is a very important and interesting event, we have our PSPMI annual business meeting for June. And obviously we have some learning objectives, how to build better relationships with your team, your boss, and your colleagues, how to align and remove obstacles for personal leadership development, and how to decode the leadership myths to identify what really matters. This will be held on June 24th, and this starts at 7 o'clock. So it's 7 o'clock to 8:30 p.m. Now about our speakers. Here you see Kelly Schactler. Kelly, you have her whole thing there. I'll just read parts of it. Kelly is a project management navigation expert with many project management adventures and snafus under her belt. She is the owner of Project Management Rebooted. Project Management Rebooted mission is to bring simple, relevant project management tools and concepts to organizations and individuals. You can visit Kelly on kellyschachtler.com, which I highly recommend. Our other speaker is Paul Thompson. And Paul is an experienced program manager and engineering professional with 20 years of extensive technology experience. Paul is also the author of Data Center Migration Using the ROPE Framework, Results-Oriented Project Execution, as well as the CEO of Metagear. Metagear.com is his website, and also very interesting. So now we will go ahead and introduce the Paul and Kelly for our one where the project blew up, when bad project events happen to good people.
Thanks, Jeff, and howdy all. We're really glad to be here. I'm Paul Thompson, and for the next 90 minutes or so, we're going to look behind the curtain to get a better understanding of why sometimes bad things do happen to good PMs.
And I'm Kelly, and I promise, Jeff, we're only going to have positive vibes tonight and PDUs, so something for everyone. We don't need to waste any more time on introducing ourselves. If you want to know more, you can visit our website. So tonight, we're going to start off and dive into this session with a poll. So Mike, if you can bring that first poll up, we've got a question for you. So what's the number one reason? And we know there's a lot, but what's the number one reason your own projects have blown up? Was it the people? You know, those pesky people are always messing things up. Was it budget, right? Usually too little, never too much. Maybe communication challenges, seems vexing for a lot of us. Scope changes. Is there a project that never experiences those? Maybe it was some politics that crept in and really sank it, or something in your organization or enterprise environment. And the one I personally love, because it has happened to me, I missed something important. So go ahead and vote for a second here. We'll give it a few seconds. And then Mike will bring up the results. So Mike, I'll leave it to you to leave the enough time. Scope changes first, and the organizational enterprise obstacles second, and third, the people. I'm a little surprised, but I like it, you know, all true. And sometimes it's not any one thing, right, that is responsible for our projects going sideways. And so I have no doubt in the next 90 minutes, we're going to hear some captivating stories featuring these favorite failure factors in project management. So Paul, tell us what's happening next.
That's right. So Kelly, I was a little surprised, right? One of my favorite problems for me is always communication. So interesting results there. But we've got a big night planned, so let's unpack it a little bit. We're going to start out with an expert panel discussion on some of the pains of project management, right? We've all experienced them. We've brought some experts to the table to kind of talk through some of those. Then, we're going to talk about what's the success factors, because if you're going to deal with the pain, let's see if we can get you through the pain and into success factors. And we're also going to talk to a section we call Coach's Corner. And this is taken directly from our My Project Hell webcast, where we're going to have a PM present their current issue and see if we can do some experience shares and some coaching to help them get through it. Now, Zoom may not be the most interactive, friendly medium, but what we'd like everybody to do is to join in on the conversation by using the share, right? Use the chat, add your comments. We'd love to see them as we go, and we'll probably be asking for some comments here and there. So please share your ideas and thoughts in the chat. Now, when we get to the end, we're going to address some questions, and Robbie's keeping an eye on the Q&A. So if you'd like some more formal questions for Kelly and I, throw those in Q&A and we'll get to those at the end. But you've been warned, you know what's ahead of you. So let's see if we can get started.
Yeah, I really want to encourage you to use the chat. I'm looking at the chat right now. So let's have some fun. All right, so we'd like to introduce our Project Hell Masters panel. We've invited these fine folks here tonight to share their insights and wisdom that they've gained throughout their career. So first up, I'd like to introduce Laura Vesey. And Laura is currently a principal technical program manager at Oracle. And she's had a multifaceted career where she's worked on everything from strategy board games to health management programs and PMO management, where she's built high-performing teams. And now she's creating order and peace in the cloud infrastructure universe. All of those experiences have led Laura to be passionate about delivering leadership, strategy, and execution in thriving organizations.
And I get the privilege of introducing Ellen. She's a senior project manager from an IT team over at Evergreen Health. Now, she's worked at several other health providers over the last 10 years. And in addition, she's got 20 years of project delivery, customer engagement, and program leadership in a vast, really extensive experience area, including the music industry, hospitality, personal finance. One of my favorite things about Ellen is she's discovered that hosting a radio morning show, producing a concert series, planning your wedding, and organizing a retirement portfolio is a lot like putting together a surgical suite. They're all remarkably similar projects.
All right, and our third Project Hell Master is Mauricio Malagon, and Mauricio is a senior technical project and portfolio manager with 15 years of experience in engineering and PM roles. Mauricio says he's passionate about leading cross-functional teams as they dig into identifying and implementing process and design improvements. Mauricio has enjoyed leveraging his education and PM experiences to develop cross-functional technical project teams, supercharging their communication and collaboration powers to achieve successful project outcomes. All right, so welcome to our 3 PM masters. Now, Paul, how is this going to work?
Right. So, like any good thing, right? We're project managers. There are rules to this game. And Kelly and I will be directing questions to different members of the panel. And we're going to probably probe a little bit for getting some additional insights underneath the first or second kind of answer to see what we can dig into. But we do only have 30 minutes for this section. So we might also poke and prod you along, not to be rude and cut you off. We're just trying to move the conversation forward. So let's get started here. The first question is going to be to Ellen and Mauricio.
Right.
And Ellen, what I'd like to know is, what are the real stumbling blocks that you sort of see in the projects you have to manage, right? What do you sort of plan for, just knowing out of the gate that these are the big ones?
Sure. So in my current organization at Evergreen, our PMO rolls up under IT. It's not a strategic PMO, even though we're leading clinical discussions. So that's one piece of it, right? Like, you've got a lot of folks who don't know everything. They shouldn't know everything, but they're in a position of having to know everything pretty quick. Added to that, we consistently, it's a thing, have too many projects in the pipeline all at once. So how does that play out at the project team level? Those first few weeks of planning and discovery, when we don't know everything and we know it, are over top of another go live. So half the team is either distracted or still in a command center or just not even there. At the leadership level, IT leadership is rarely present at the beginning, where you kind of need them to help educate clinical stakeholders about the ramifications of their decisions or whatever. They show up all at the end with their very technical opinions. It's a little late for us to kind of regroup. And then it leaves clinical and operational folks going, wow, you think that's the showstopper? Interesting. It's a little bit of a dance that the PM is riding in between, trying to balance all of that.
Right. Right. So, well, let me ask you this, because it sounds like in your world, IT leads the clinical staff. Does that present problems and kind of getting out of whack with what clinicians need versus what IT is bringing?
It does. I think that's part of the art and the science, right? Anybody, anywhere gets to put a project request in the hopper, but then there's this sort of black box where the projects come out and it's, here's what we're doing, and it's the most important work, trust us, right? And there's some process that maybe half the stuff that was requested wasn't feasible. The other half maybe isn't affordable. So here's what we're doing this year, everybody on board. And that's fine. You got to start somewhere, but maybe trying to find who's your champion now is a different game than when everybody was sort of in a free-for-all trying to find out their strategy.
Sure. Now, do you guys have a formal intake demand management process, or is it sort of, as you said, shiny object, go chase it?
We do have an intake process, and it's developing for sure. I think I've just been there for 3 years, and it's changed a lot in that 3 years. We've had to get better at really asking those right questions way at the beginning. So many projects, I started there in 2018, and halfway through the year, it's, ooh, that thing has a regulatory requirement that starts in October. If we could go ahead and get that going, that'd be great. Like, too late. So we're getting better.
That sounds great. Mauricio, what are the stumbling blocks you run into?
Yeah, so good evening, everyone. Thank you for this opportunity. I appreciate it. I would say that, talking in general terms, competing priorities / lack of resources, that is the number one stumbling block, right? That is only so many engineers or professionals or team members to support a project. So that is always a challenge. And that's why it's important to have the engagement of the champions and of the functional management as well, to make sure that we're always prioritizing the right projects and providing them with the right resources.
Mm-hmm.
In my experience, if I were just to say it at a high level, I think that is the biggest challenge.
Okay. Organization, it's definitely matrixed, right? You sort of get a little bit of an engineer and then they're off to another project. So how do you guys, tend to be able to manage those coming and goings of your resources?
Yes, actually, we have forums where we do weekly reviews of the projects, and every project is vetted by the management chain and any applicable SMEs before it is brought up to that forum. So it's an ongoing PMO and organizational wide effort to prioritize the portfolio. It is a portfolio management in a way.
Okay, good, because that was going to be where I was going to go, right? It sounds like your PMO is doing some portfolio management, and then sort of trying to tick and tie that back to the resource management to help you guys out in the trenches, right?
Yes, correct. And it's actually what I work now is actually it's done pretty well. That the management really has a good sense of the pulse of the projects and which projects need to be prioritized.
Okay.
It's a pretty dynamic situation where everyone contributes, and I think we have a good system, currently.
Well, it definitely sounds like you guys are dealing with it, and you're dealing with the same things that many of us run into, right? We're trying to figure out at the front end of these projects that we may know half of. We may be technical and not understand the business, or vice versa. And how do we bridge that gap? How do we manage staff versus intake? So yeah, those are definitely huge roadblocks. It's interesting to hear that kind of Ellen, like you say, regardless of if it's a surgical suite or planning a wedding, we're all running into the same darn problems over and over.
Yeah, there's been some fantastic contributions here in the chat, fear of change, managing scope changes, overextended resources, right?
Yeah.
Addressing symptoms and not root causes. Yeah, that's all great. And I know behind all of these different types of obstacles, there's stories. And so I can't help but wonder about the stories behind the obstacles. So Jeff, if you can go to the next slide, let's go to the second question, which we're going to ask Laura and Ellen. And that's, what is the best story you have about turning around a horrendous project situation? And Laura, why don't you go first?
So I was hired into one company to, I didn't know it at the time, but to fix the program that was sliding sideways. And it was a highly technical program. And I didn't understand a single word anyone said to me the entire time I worked at that company. But it came down to being able to get people back on track, just leveraging core concepts. Like, does everyone know what they're working on? Does everyone have their business requirements? Has every project manager read their business requirements? Do we have a template for when we transition project managers? Because the team had turned over about 3 times by the time I walked in the door. And daily stand-ups. And then I found what became the most powerful was leveraging the power of the team. So not trying to pretend that I knew the answers, but someone presented a problem, asking the team around me, okay, how do you think we should solve that? What do you think is the best way of approaching that? And just leveraging the wise crowds to get us moving forward.
I like that. It takes a little bit of humility, right? To say, hey, I don't know what's going on. Can you help me? And it's what I like to call like confidence. You're sitting there asking all the right questions, and sounds like you also held some feet to the fire to get some different things going, right? But you were also willing to say, hey, help me out here. I don't know.
Yeah, if I heard the same state status from a PM 3 days in a row, I knew there was a problem.
And then what did you do?
So I've heard you mention this a couple times now. How can we help you get unstuck? Do you need help from me? Do you need help from someone else? And usually they didn't want to have to really ask for help, so they got it in gear and moved it forward.
Accountability, it's a beautiful thing. How about you, Ellen? What's your best story about turning around a kind of sticky project situation?
So many to choose from. I inherited my most recent project that I delivered from another PM already rolling, which is a deadly thing in itself. It was a huge electronic medical record implementation for a women's and children's service line. So sensitive communities, multiple communities all piled in there, different needs. And it was 6 months after kickoff and 5 months before the scheduled go live. So right at the halfway point, just when it's perfect to be the new PM in the mix. Thanks. Outgoing PM had been statusing it as slightly behind where they wanted it to be. They were still in design and discovery mode. No build had started yet. So that was fun to break that news to everybody, but we got it on track. We just broke down the project into discrete work streams and just tried to figure out, like, what is the actual work? We're hearing a lot of falling in love with the problem. There's a lot of admiring how large it all is, but what if we just quantified it and got going? So break it down into the smallest possible bite is how I usually work, which feels extremely processy to big organizations who just want to see a lot of magic happening. Like, the thing that makes that happen is about 42,000 spreadsheets and hours in a room with a whiteboard. So get out of that, discover the current state, and get into deliver the project. 30 work streams, about 2/3 were about build, and 1/3 around hardware, a training effort for 600 people over top of a pandemic, haha. So like, it was loaded, right?
Yeah, I think we all can feel your pain.
Yeah, and I needed 5 more months, 2 more PMs, and another $1.2 million. So how do you sell that as the recent arrival on the project? We had to just reframe it and really start all speaking the same language about what we were doing. Once we peeled away all the sort of onion layers, we realized that if you're the NICU physician, you think that you're building out the NICU. And if you are in the OBOR, you think you're building a surgical suite. It's both, guys. Two great tastes taste great together. We need to do both. Both of you have to talk about it the same way I do. So it was trying to really tell the story of, if you're building an ED, 2 L&D units, a PEDS unit, a NICU, and launching 2 clinics, we're actually building an EMR for health system. Obviously, that's a 16-month project. Obviously, it needs another $1 million, and obviously it needs all hands on deck, right? So it was a sales effort that was worth it. That's the kind of thing they usually do in a kickoff, and I would never suggest that the previous PM didn't do that. I think they just got right down to it and started discovering, but didn't take the time to get agreement on what it was we were all doing.
It's very gracious of you, Ellen. Hey, you mentioned breaking bad news to stakeholders, and I'm wondering, what's your approach to breaking bad news to stakeholders when you're trying to turn a situation around, or you're trying to right the ship? How do you go about that?
I think taking the time to actually understand the facts, which is hard when you're not the subject matter expert, right? So you do have to go a little bit deep, find an example, and then keep it to those facts, really get comfortable with the terminology. If there's a rev cycle problem, suddenly you need to understand exactly how coding happens, because you have one shot to break that bad news and to get the action heard. Also, don't break bad news without at least posing some sort of solution. I found is a good thing too. It's not enough to just status something red and moonwalk out. You have to be able to state the path back to green, or at least to yellowish, so that folks can rally around the solution. I find, building a coalition around, who's with me. Everybody loves that. Turns out sponsors and stakeholders do too, even the toughest doctors. So that's usually how I approach it.
Misery does love company. It is a rallying point too. I found if you, as a project manager, if you can use it as a rallying point, it does work. It takes a little bit of effort. So thank you both for sharing that.
Yeah, and Ellen, that is great. And one thing is funny because I think on my project Hell, at least 2, maybe 3 of our guests, the issue has been I came into a project halfway through, or
Mhm.
a PM left and I was given their projects, right?
Inheritance. Yes.
Yeah, it's over and over. But what I liked is that you went back and told us what you learned and how to move it forward. And that's sort of our next question to Mauricio and Laura, right? So rather than just dwell on, when things blow up and when, oh my God, I was up till 4 a.m. going through spreadsheets and everything. Mauricio, tell us, kind of out of this pain, what have you gained, right? What is the learning experience that you've really been carrying forward with some of these projects that have been the hardest for you?
Yes, and I thought about this, Paul, about how to best answer this. And I would
It's
like
not
to say,
easy. It's a tough one.
yeah, so I will have to go back to my first learning experience or training that I've had at that point was my first internship. I was an intern for a construction company in New York City. We built a boutique hotel in the what's known as the Meatpacking District in Manhattan. And up until that point, I didn't have any professional practical experience. It had all been academic. And that was quite the eye-opening situation for me. And I would think that even though I had the technical background by doing an engineering degree and some project management theory at that point, in my opinion, there is nothing like going and actually leading a project, right? You have to do it. And then while doing that, kind of fall back and review your theory and your experience from other projects and look for advice, call into forums like this one, or look for mentors to help you out. But it's that combination that I think is of experience and education that's important. I think both of them are important.
That's pretty insightful, and it's a theme that I think you might see through the rest of this, right? Is being able to accept mentoring and coaching from those who have been there before you, as you start, as you work on your 10,000 hours to become the expert you want to be. Laura, how about you?
Probably just the most brass tacks, best training I've ever had is myself and the team did a 2-day facilitation training class for how to deal with obstreperous people, how to keep the meeting moving, and how to aggregate enormous amounts of information and get it organized and having everyone agree. So I've used that all the way from working with VPs to working with systems analysts in terms of getting everyone in a room together, mining their knowledge and moving us forward.
All right, give us one benefit there, because I can tell you how not to do it. I want to hear one trick for doing it.
One is, and Kelly and maybe others will know, it's you give the audience time to brainstorm on the topic. You get it all up on a board, usually in Post-it notes or whatnot, and then you start organizing it, and then you start looking for gaps, and then you have the conversation around it. But you get a starting place of mining everyone for all the things that they're worried about, that they're concerned about, and that they know need to happen.
Okay, so you really kind of got to get it out there, ask the hard questions, make sure you can capture it, and then find the gaps.
Yep.
Okay,
Yep.
That is awesome. Thank you, guys.
So we've got a bonus question. Surprise! It's not hard though. And while we've got our training and our learning experiences, that's realistically what we have to work with. Wouldn't it be nice if we had a magic wand? And so the question to you, the bonus question, purely based on your imagination, of course, is if you had a magic wand and you could fix any one thing in your project management orbit, how would you use it? And I want to start with Ellen on this one. This is for all three of you.
Unmuting. Wow, toss up between no more pandemics, please and thank you. And I think priority setting. It's every organization I've ever worked for, big and small, including the brides, including the rock stars. They can't set priorities, right? We all follow shiny objects.
Thank you. And Mauricio, how about you? What would you use a magic wand to fix one thing?
I will say the perception of project management as a secondary skill / activity that needs to happen, and towards the perception of this is a prime need. And I'm not saying this is the case across the board, but I've seen some few examples really where the organization doesn't really understand the value of project management. I think project management is just an Excel where we do a status and everyone gets to talk about their bullet point for 5 minutes, and we take notes and send out the minutes, and that's
Yeah,
it.
we need project managers so you can set up meetings, send out the notes, and put together a status report weekly. After that, we don't really need you, right?
Order lunch.
Exactly.
Order lunch. That's always a good one for the meetings.
Exactly, or set up the conference call.
Yeah. No, that's a worthy one to wave your wand on.
Yep. So
Definitely.
prioritize the project management skill set. And Laura, how about you? Tell us what you'd wave your magic wand and have it fix.
That all project sponsors came fully trained in what their roles and responsibilities were.
Oh, that's a good one too. I think you might have had some issues there.
Yeah, just a few.
Yeah, it's nice to dream a project management world where there's no pandemics, there's priority setting, the PM skill set is valued, and our sponsors are trained in all their roles and responsibilities. I like it. Well, thank you, Laura, Ellen, and Mauricio. That's all of our questions for tonight. We're going to move on to our next segment. It was really nice. You found a sense of adventure in sharing your experience with all of us. And what I really appreciated was your candor and humor. I think that's one of the things that's jumping out for me, is that we have to keep our sense of humor and our wits about us when this bad project stuff happens. Well, what about you, Paul? What resonated? I'm curious.
No, it was hard because coming into all of these, I always have a different kind of viewpoint, and then we hear from our experts. Also watching the chat session, saw a number of folks there kind of echoing the same thing, right? Roles and responsibilities, being able to herd the cats, right? That's the priorities. And that for me, you're going to hear this is my soapbox: communication, communication, communication. But for my magic wand, I need to point it back at me and make sure that I'm delivering the right communication in the way the receivers need to hear it at the right time. That's my goal. I'm not always good at hitting that one, so that's where I would throw my magic wand. What about you, Kelly?
I'm thinking, I think that I would want it to make it so everyone would assume positive intent for everyone else. I struggle with this myself. The mind naturally wants to hone in on a negative assumption, and that's usually the worst way to go. And so really, if we could just assume positive intent about folks, you get folks who aren't maybe delivering, being accountable, the 5 dysfunctions of a team, and like, why not check out what's really going on underneath and how you might be able to help, instead of assume some big negative, bummer assumption. So that's what I would do.
I like that. Positive intent. All
Yeah.
right. How are we doing the slides? Okay, we're caught back up. So let's talk a little bit about this next section, because it truly is one of my favorites. Kelly and I do this presentation quite a bit. We've done it a couple of different places. We have our My Project Hell webcast. And every time I hear Kelly talk about the subject of project success factors, I learn something new, and I know I'm going to pick up something, and I hope you guys get it too. So help us understand now that we've kind of talked about some of the pain, let's move to success.
Did I just hear you say you're still learning from me?
Absolutely.
Okay, cool. So when Paul and I were putting this webinar together, we understood that it wasn't going to be enough to only focus on bad project events. Sure, no doubt about it. It's fascinating. It's comforting at the same time to listen to one another's tales of woe and struggle. And there are a lot of great takeaways in bringing those out and talking about them. But we also wanted to bring up an aspect of project management. It was sort of like the flip side of the horrendous project stories. And so we thought it would be helpful if we revisited and dug into the topic of project success factors, which I personally think is a very mundane, boring aspect of project planning. I don't know about you, but it's so important. And those thoughts are exactly why I was like, I think we need to consider and explore this. It shouldn't be mundane and it shouldn't be boring. So we all know that when something's taken for granted and glossed over time after time after time, then it's meaningless, or worse, it's a breakdown point. So who of you here tonight have been sitting there in front of your laptop during your initial project planning and you get to success factors? And it just seems like you're churning out all of those same old, my project success factors. I have enough budget. I stay on schedule. My project sponsor is engaged. And this is what Paul and I call the no-duh success factors. They are obvious, they're generic, and stating the obvious and generic is not going to add any value to your project planning. So why even bother? Has anyone else besides me thought of that? I'm looking in the chat, looking to see if I'm alone on an island. One person. Thank you, Mike. So cool. Thank you, everyone. There we go.
We're coming back.
You can say no. I've never thought about that way, but let's regroup for a minute and make sure that we're on the same page about what a success factor is. And so I thought, hey, let's go take a look and crack open the PMBOK, right? Let's see what they say about it. But guess what? It's not in the glossary, at least in my edition. I don't, the 7th edition isn't out yet, I don't think. It's the 6th edition. But interesting enough, we've got all these studies about project management. They're all over the place. But the authors and the luminaries who did all this research in project management, they don't have any consensus on the definition of success or how to measure it. And as we have all painfully witnessed in our own projects, project success is really dependent on our individual perception and perspective. So we and all our stakeholders have our own definitions of project success. And I don't think you'll disagree that can complicate everything. So logically, we can say there's no such thing as absolute success in project management. There's only perceived success of the project. And that success is dependent on the definition of whoever is defining it. Guess who that is, everyone? Usually, it's us. Usually, we're driving the train on that and getting the incoming information to define success. So that's the number one reason that we're going to zero in on this tonight, on project success factors. And we need a common definition to start with. So if you want to go look in the PMBOK glossary, go ahead, but I didn't find one. So Paul and I created a definition ourselves. It wasn't any genius by any stretch of the imagination. So this is what we came up with. Something or someone that actively contributes to a project accomplishment, result, or process, and has a positive impact on the outcome. So,
and I really like the way you express that, right? It has to have a positive outcome.
Right. It's the things that really matter. The something extra, not the mundane and the generic. So to me, Paul, it's the net difference between average, status quo kind of robot success factors and those relevant, meaningful elements that are the difference between, yeah, we did this and we did what matters with excellence. Nice. It's like the green dragon hot sauce from Trader Joe's that just enhances everything. So while this definition isn't explicitly in the PMBOK glossary, but they talk about success factors all the time, right, in the PMBOK. It's just not, I didn't find it in the glossary. It was a big topic in the last Project Management Institute Pulse of the Profession survey that they did in 2018. Anybody ever take a look at this 2018 Pulse of the Profession survey? It was the PMI 10th annual global survey, and they called it Success in Disruptive Times. And I was like, wow, that was perceptive. We hadn't even had a pandemic yet. And they polled project management professionals, PMO directors, senior executives actually gave their thoughts, people in all wide range of global industries, all different topics. And when they shared on what they thought were their success factors, there were 3 things that came up that they thought made their project management execution successful. So the first one, surprise, having an actively engaged leadership sponsor. So having someone in a leadership capacity who serves as a sponsor or champion for your project. And we've seen this, right? Well, I hope you have. And if you haven't, your day's coming. We've got a sponsor. That person goes the whole way with you. They're out there getting buy-in and engagement. They're creating fans. They're moving mountains and molehills when needed. I hope this isn't too much of a fantasy. And you can find them when you need them.
Yes.
You can find them when you need them. That's a big one. And then we have the second top success factor that came out of this survey, and that was the ability to avoid additional work and uncontrolled changes outside of the scope. And we've heard that tonight, right? Scope changes, killers of projects. So adding work unnecessarily, that's a big one. Have you ever run a formal project without a change control process? I have. It's kind of ugly. And you're prey to all the stakeholders and their own personal agendas and all of their wonderful add-ons, right?
Yep. A fully funded project is a scope magnet.
Exactly. And then the top third one was using project management tools effectively and consistently to organize how projects are done in the organization. And so we've seen this too, right? Oh, here's some tools. No, we don't have any tools. Well, here's some tools, but they're optional. Or here's some tools and they're mandatory, but no one is ever held accountable. And here's some tools that are required, but we're not sure why we're requiring them. We've always done it that way, so let's keep doing it, right? Different ways that people think about using project management tools, but the key as a success factor, consistent and effective. So Paul, that's just 3. I know there's more that the survey discusses, but I'm curious what our audience might think.
So little audience participation time again, right? What are you guys seeing out there as, you know, success factors that you call out and you work towards on your project? And one of my superpowers that Kelly always reminds me of is I'm really good with awkward silence and can fill dead air until there's no tomorrow. So if we don't see anything, you'll get me.
Don't tempt him, people. Don't let it be silent out there.
And Kelly and Paul, I just wanted to tell you that we have a couple of questions also in front of us. So once we are through with this, we can go with those.
Sounds good, Ravi. Thank you.
Well, it looks like we've got, you know, end users actually using and getting and understanding things. Communication, good. Wow, these are going by fast, and I'm a bad reader. Little love here, Kelly.
Okay, engage. All right, no awkward silence. Engaged and focused team members that are mostly dedicated to the project. Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, that would be a good one with the magic wand. The scope of the project delivers measurable business value.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, motivation as a success factor.
Buy-in. I can read that one. I love that one. All right. Yep. Alignment, scope. Good. And you know, these are all right too. You know, there is really no wrong success factor because it depends on the individual. If we punch the slide, we can see what oftentimes we get back. These seem to be our most common occurring ones, right? scope control, accountability, all of those things. But this is where Kelly and I sort of start to ask the question, like, so what, right? Again, we've kind of, why does it matter, Kelly? You know, how do we get past the motherhood and apple pie of, you know, who's going to argue with you need scope control? Who's going to argue with these things, right? How do we get past that, you know, motherhood and apple pie and move into implementation on our day-to-day projects?
Yeah, I love that question. So what? First time someone asked me that, I was like, what? So what? Oh, that's a good question. Yeah, why does it matter? Very good. So it's really about making an amazing apple pie and then having the ice cream and the cheddar cheese or whatever you like, caramel sauce, what you like to put on top of your pie, right? So it starts, for me, it starts with asking, how meaningful are your success factors? And not just meaningful to you, they have to be meaningful to the project stakeholders, because it's not about us. I know we like to make it that it's about us as project managers, right? But it's not. And what I mean by meaningful is finding relevant and significant ways to capture what criteria are going to make your project outcome successful. So moving beyond that, having enough budget, resources, minimizing scope changes, it's about keeping the project stakeholders, who are our customers, at the forefront of this. Making it about them is how we're going to get more buy-in and engagement. So the first step in this process of identifying meaningful project success factors is to ask your stakeholders, what do they think success looks like? And more importantly, what in their mind do they see has to be in place to get to that place of success? So once you've got your list of success factors, then the fun begins, because now you can use these success factors to also craft some of your project objectives or KPIs. So one effective approach to creating meaningful success factors is to actually embed your objectives or your KPIs, embed the success factors in the objectives and KPIs to achieve them in your project. Okay, so that might have been a like blah, 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 blah. Kelly, what does that mean? All right. For example, how many of you have used strong sponsor engagement as a project success factor? I have. All right. It's another no-duh criteria. Everyone knows this is a success factor. So in a past project that I worked on, we took that success criteria and turned it into one of our SMART objectives for the project. Sponsor presents at least 3 project benefits or value presentations across the organization to build buy-in, and then converted it to a success factor. Project sponsor actively champions project benefits and value in meetings and presentations across the organization. So this way, your success factors are solidly embedded in your project. It's like a thread that's woven through your project, from your objectives to your success factors. And what you're doing is you're really supporting the why of the project in a way that hits home the business benefits that your stakeholders actually care about.
I like that visual, right? It's woven into the project objectives. Let me give you one of my examples.
Bring it. I want to hear about it.
One of the things my company does is we move data centers for clients, right? And as you can imagine, building out a data center, moving all their applications and stuff, it requires about 10,000 things to go exactly right at the right time. And what we've discovered is, over the years, one of the biggest success factors is zero unplanned downtime. And oftentimes we'll initially meet with the program owner and start to talk about this, right? And get them excited about it and get them to understand that, you know, being able to measure this on a regular basis and deliver zero unplanned downtime is going to be a huge success factor for you, for the business, for all the technical engineers along the way. And it builds from there, because now when I go to the director of applications and I let them know, right, senior leadership has determined that zero unplanned downtime is going to be one of our major success factors. And I've got a process that's going to get you there, but I need your help to line up with this and get all of our resources aligned so we can all meet this success factor together. That really starts to cohese the team and brings a lot of power from words that started out pretty simple.
Oh, perfect story, because this reminds me of one thing I see project managers doing is we're typing in our success factors into the project plan, and then we're filing it into the dark recesses of SharePoint, Smartsheet, whatever your favorite collaboration app. They all have their dark recesses, and we call it good. But socializing the project success factors, creating understanding around the what and the why of those factors, and communicating them out often with your teams and stakeholders, that's foundational. When everyone knows what success looks like and what's needed to get there, you know what you're doing? You're creating vision, a common vision, and accountability for people to rally around. So, you know, include these success factors in your stakeholders, your team, your governance meetings. If you do governance, I heard that that's getting thrown out with bathwater. And even your vendor meetings. Vendors need to be rallying around this too, and sometimes they're left out in the cold and we wonder why they're going rogue. So to wrap up the success factor segment, next time you're considering your project success factors, ask your stakeholders what they think, listen carefully, make sure you've got your factors identified, and then tie them into your project objectives and your KPIs, and then share those out with everyone early and often.
I like that. I really do. And I like, you know, you're weaving it into the fabric of your project, right? It's going to hold everything together. That is great. Thank you, Kelly. Hopefully everybody does get something out of that, because I know I picked up a new thing or two, right? This is not just a script that Kelly's reading from. This is really from her heart and from her experience. So appreciate that. All right. Now, for those of you who don't know Kelly and I'm going to guess it's everybody, we're big believers in paying it forward into the project management community. And on our webcast, My Project Hell, I'm going to get that in at least 2 or 3 more times, so you might want to visit it. We started what we called Coach's Corner. And Coach's Corner is where Kelly and I invite a project manager onto the show to talk about an issue that they're wrestling with. We really started discovering that there's a lot of project managers out there that really just want somebody to bounce an idea off of, or have somebody else look at it a little bit differently without a horse in the race to give them some advice. And so that's what Kelly and I do in this segment. We try to offer up some experience shares and some insights to help the project manager get themselves out of their project hell and back on the safe ground. And for this, I'm going to love to welcome Dan to our Coach's Corner. Dan is an experienced project manager that is also a business analyst. He's earned both his PMP and his PMI PBA. And he had all the initials after his name. I'm just teasing you, Dan.
So we meet again, Mr. Thompson.
But Dan is what I affectionately love that he says. He's an industry cat herder, and he's having a ball.
Indeed.
Dan, welcome.
Indeed. Thank you, Mr. Thompson. It is my pleasure to be here. And ladies and gentlemen, for your viewing and analytical pleasure this evening, I'd like to present to you the following real-life situation with some.
Hey, stand by, Dan. You're getting ahead of us. Back up just a minute. Welcome. And Dan, we're all ears. Tell us about your project situation. What's going on in your project hell?
Well, I'm going to take some creative liberties, as the actual situation I am bound not to discuss, but I've constructed a suitable facsimile to pitch to all of you. Okay. So let's say I work for a supervillain, and the supervillain is looking to boil the Puget Sound. And I've been told that I have to manage the boiling of the Puget Sound using flamethrowers, as you would if you were working for a supervillain organization that was, you know, intent on boiling the Puget Sound for no good reason. And I've got all my stakeholders together and aligned, and we are all on our mission together to do this, except that I have a rogue stakeholder, namely a lawyer, who has been charged with making sure that we ethically boil the Puget Sound and that we do so in a very expedient manner, budget be damned. Specifically, other people's budgets be damned. And so I've been told that instead of using fire to boil the Puget Sound, I have to use bagpipes. And I must source the bagpipes within a month, when normally, if one does use bagpipes for nefarious purposes, you have to, it's about a 90-day wait to get them. And I am dealing with this stakeholder who is beating not only on me daily, but on my direct reports and the other stakeholders saying, you must do this. However, budget has not been allocated. And so I'm caught between a rock and a hard place. And so this is what I'm submitting to the Coach's Corner is, how do you handle a rogue stakeholder who wants to spend other people's money?
So Dan, I have a couple questions for
Yes.
you. Where are you at in the life cycle of boiling the ocean?
Well, currently we did have flamethrowers going outside Tacoma and outside Seattle, but we've had to disconnect them. And for various reasons having to do with budgetary and renewing the budget and saying, is this really an expedient way to do this? And because we have disconnected them, the stakeholder is now coming at this time and saying, by contract, we must get this done. And the EPA is saying, if you're going to do this, you can't use fire. So it's just right in this time where we're trying to figure out which pot of money to use. And the executives don't really want to make that decision just yet. So it's a prime time for a rogue stakeholder to strike.
And so can you describe a few of the things you've done so far to try and handle this rogue stakeholder and maybe what's happened or the outcomes of those actions?
So the first thing I did was I talked with my project sponsor and said, okay, can you please explain what the rogue stakeholder mandate is in all of this? And the mandate is simply saying there are certain rules and regulations that we have to abide by that have been imposed on us by an outside authority. In this case, let's say, we'll invoke Despicable Me and say the Bank of Evil, right? So the Bank of Evil is saying you must do these things in this time. And so the project sponsor explained that to me and said, okay, well, how do I deal with this? And the project sponsor says, I don't know. I need you to handle it because I've got all these other fires over here to deal with. The next thing I did was I summed up all the other stakeholders and said, okay, what are your mandates? What do you need to do? What are your needs? And so I'm finding out that my rogue stakeholder is working to push the agenda based on feedback from their superior. And so I have to sit there and go, okay, how far up the chain do I need to go? How do I interact with this rogue stakeholder? And so the last thing that I've done so far is meet with the stakeholder and say, what's driving this? Here's the problems right now. You're catching us in between budgetary cycles. The flame's disconnected. We've got the bagpipes on order. We've got emergency orders of haggis coming in, but we need more time than what you're telling us to give. And the stakeholder is refusing to budge. The nuclear option is to go to their boss and say any changes are going to come out of your budget. But at that point, I might as well dig a hole and hide in it for the next 50 years. Mm-hmm. So that's where I'm at right now in this situation.
And this is all within the company public knowledge. Other stakeholders are aware of your rogue stakeholders' actions and
Correct.
Lack of accountability.
It's not public knowledge, but internally, yes. And this rogue stakeholder has quite a fearsome reputation, as lawyers generally do.
Politics. Okay. Gotta love it.
Lots of politics. Paul, I'll let you go first.
Thanks.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So just so I make sure I understand it, right? Effectively, Dan, you got a great project. You had a plan. Mm-hmm. You sort of had everybody on board, and out of left field, your nemesis came in and said, wait, this is how you have to do it. Be sure to get somebody to pay for it, and you need it done as soon as possible before this date.
Correct.
and everybody else is cowering in the corner, leaving you hanging in the wind and sort of without a shield.
Correct.
Okay.
Culturally, most of my fellow stakeholders and other PMs are definitely more on the development side. They're not really in the political side so much. They don't like people.
All right. So the good news is this is not that unusual.
Okay.
The scale's a bit bigger than most people are going to deal with. So good on you, right?
Yep.
Stepping out there, doing it big or go home.
Yep.
One thing that strikes me, and I'll talk about a couple of things here as we go, but the one thing that sort of strikes me is back when we were little playing on the playground, I used to play a game called Monkey in the Middle, right? And they'd throw the ball over back and forth and I'd grab it and then, and it kind of looks like that's where you are, getting pelted from all sides and sort of expected to solve everybody's problem, right?
Yes.
Stakeholders definitely need to step up and take some ownership, right? If they've got, especially a project owner, right? Not the, well, that's for you to figure out, so I don't have to. I'm welcome to take your project owner's job and handle that for you, but right, if you want to get promoted up. So one of the things I find that really helps is start adding transparency. And this is sort of, you're playing with a little bit of fire there, right? So, so your transparency doesn't need to be all turned on at once, but I do feel that you need to start having, and I assume you're doing status reporting and you might have a dashboard. I love dashboards because they're real time and I'm constantly pushing everybody to them. And so that's where I start to have my RAID log, right? My decisions as John Q. Public said, we have to do this. And the risk associated with that is there is no budget to do this. And, and start building it that way. And then start to make sure that decisions are called back to who's making them. And you start, little by little, you start adding a light, and then you start turning the volume up if it doesn't get heard. Right? Because it's not a decision you get to make. You're just sort of stuck with resolving, make hay, by the way, we don't want to give you anything to do that with.
Yeah, I can do that. I've been so busy trying to play catch up and just trying to, as you said earlier in the evening, communicate that I haven't been able to sit down and start documenting and say, okay, here's visibility, here's layers, here's ramifications of this decision, and getting the analysis done, saying, here's the proposed costs. I can start doing that.
Okay. It's a good step. Kelly?
Yeah, I like that. And I also like Laura's VC's put them in the octagon and whoever wins directs this effort. I'm going with Laura's advice. And so Dan, the first question I'd be asking myself is the same that you've been asking yourself is, why is this person doing what they're doing and they're not taking accountability that needs to be taken? And how can I, in my role, bring some resolution? And I think when we think about lack of accountability, it's tied to things like, low standards, not knowing how or what the requirements are for their role, like you mentioned. It sounds like your rogue stakeholders' priorities might be different from yours in the organization. Maybe they don't trust you. I don't know. And it sounds like you already talked to them, right? You did an interview, it sounds like.
I did. Yeah, that was one of the initial things. Because again, communication, that's my immediate first go-to whenever I run into a situation is communicate, figure out what it is and get everybody on the same plane level. Based on what my stakeholder register, says, and I do use a stakeholder register. I am a converted believer in those now.
Cool. Well, maybe you need to go interview them again. This time you've got more information. Do a real interview with this person where you might be asking a couple questions, but you're listening mostly. This is an attorney, a lawyer. They probably, maybe, I don't know, they like to talk, but let them talk. And then you're listening and getting underneath the words coming out of their mouth, right? Because a lot of times we make wrong assumptions about why someone's acting a certain way. Like that's why I wanted my magic wand to do positive intent, which is really hard in this situation.
Yeah.
But we do read our own interpretations into what's happening without really finding out underlying perspectives. So I would recommend going and doing another real honest to goodness interview and really try to find out, do they understand their impact that they're having on this project and how it's going to contribute to the success or failure? And I think equally as important is finding out the what's in it for them and emphasizing that, right? And only they will be able to tell you what they're about and what they're looking for. I mean, at the heart of this, it's figuring that out the best you can, what matters most to them. And not just in relation to the project, because right now, it kind of looks like this project is rating about as high on the I care scale as rewatching another episode of Friends, right? Personally, what matters to this person? Recognition, being seen as an influencer, being seen as the gatekeeper, the control person. And maybe there's a strategy that you can come up with that speaks to what they care about. And I think this might create maybe a shift along with the transparency factor and grease some of those proverbial skids to get them to engage the way that you need them to.
I can do that.
Okay, I like that. I'm going to give you a tool that we use when we run into similar situations. And this is going to, your PMI, PBA is going to play right into this. And I love that you have that skill, because I think project managers are becoming project managers / project analysts, and being able to cross and take data and really analyze it. We've developed what we call a one-pager. It's a nice way of saying, write your problem down to one page, but it's got to have a few things, right? What's the situation? What's the current business drivers? And then what's your recommendation, right? This is where what you're doing is remember your project owner who's like, solve my problem, but you need him to market your solution. You're going to give him his answers, right? Take this to your boss. Let me help you help me. So we always do it where it's that. And then we have a little table that is, 3 alternatives, right? And each one of them has, what it is, brief half a sentence, the pros, the cons, and the risks. And it has to be written at VP level, right? So that'd be what, 3rd grader, 4th grader reading level? Third. And be able to really synthesize. And I'll tell you, getting that down to, truly 1.5 pages is the hardest thing we ever have to do, because I can write for 32 pages and eventually get what I need on paper. But to bring it down to just a 4 or 5 paragraphs, that takes you getting super clear on really what's the situation, what are the business drivers here, and what's it going to take to solve it. And then being able to it's your 30-second elevator pitch to your boss, to everybody, and then start marketing the heck out of that. Do your paper route around all the stakeholders, get them on board.
Okay, I can do that.
And then I've just got another 2 cents. It sounds like you're pretty near your boundaries of everything that you can do, right? There's still a few things maybe you can do, but if you get to your boundaries and your meter is full, it's time to push on your sponsor to handle it at a leadership level. I mean, that's what they're there for. And I know this isn't ideal, because then you feel like, like that tattletale PM that can't handle it, but that is not what this is. You've done your due diligence. You've interviewed twice, 3 times. You've listened, you supported, you devised strategy, you did your 1-pager. You've got roles and responsibilities lined out, and they are still not doing what they need to do. And allowing them to stay in that place of not taking accountability is not just harming the project and the people in your project, is harming the organization. And so, this isn't about, pointing fingers. It's about here's the facts, right? Here's the issue, here's the impact. It is not about the person. And so when we keep it there, I think that we're able to get sometimes some clarity and some forward movement. Paul?
Okay.
What do you think, Dan? Got any takeaways you're going to be able to use?
Yeah, actually, I really like doing the second interview, and I really do appreciate the reminder to actually make the time to sit down and start charting out, the potential decisions, the cost of those decisions, and track them, and then have that second interview, and then just slowly build that case up, and then I think I can do that one page. I think I can do the 1 page or 1.5 page, and then manage upward to manage my project sponsor and say, listen, I understand you've got other, evil schemes that you've got to take care of, but I really need you to redirect to do this, or else we're gonna, just leave the Puget Sound as it is, and that just absolutely cannot stand. So I can see that all building up towards managing my manager I can see it building consecutively. And if the rogue stakeholder gets in line anytime before that, great. If not, I'm eventually building a solid platform for my sponsor to deal with my rogue stakeholder and either shoot them into orbit or use the mind control lasers on them to get them back into line.
Or your great storytelling abilities.
Yes.
You have some great storytelling abilities.
Yeah.
It's about having the hard conversations and building your side of the story up. So thank you. Appreciate it, Dan.
Yes, thank you, Dan.
Pleasure.
This is not easy, right? I mean, I gotta say, I love it that you came on here, kind of bared your soul, right? And I mean, you effectively solved your own problem with us just sort of going, yeah, that pointed out what you're already doing. So appreciate that. And we are always looking for PMs to come on our website and sit in Coach's Corner. So if anybody out here does want to stop by our website, and if anybody hasn't heard, it's myprojecthell.com. Register and join us for my Coach's Corner.
All right, Ravi, we are ready for some Q&A.
We're actually on time, I think.
Bring that.
Thank you, Kelly and Paul. What a fantastic session so far. I think I have learned a lot. And I'm also thinking about, success factors. I'm also thinking about, the way Dan talked about, boiling the Puget Sound project. So that's, I'm still, trying to go and dig deep dive there. So I have a good amount of questions. And all these are, I would call them a variety set of questions. One talks about leadership. So let me go with the first question. Dina asked us, what experience do you have where leadership either does not agree on what should be included in scope, or there isn't agreement on the level of effort it will take to complete the work?
That's funny, Dina. That's a good question.
Kelly, you want to take a swing at this one first?
Yeah, it feels like that happens a lot. Leadership can't agree on scope. And so one thing that I found has helped was getting together like a governance team, which is just a small pod of decision-making leaders, not the whole steering committee or whatever your group is, but it has the sponsors in there for sure, maybe a business and an operations sponsor, and it's like a little pod of decision makers. And that's where we hash that out and get agreement, and then we bring it forward to steering, and it's like it's already sort of been decided. And so, sometimes I would have to do my homework and get the data and the information, to support a direction that they wanted to go. But I found taking it into a small decision-making group before it goes to the big one is often helpful. When it comes to not having agreement on the level of effort that it will take to complete the work, what's everybody looking at? I think what data are they looking at? Is everyone looking at the same data? Are people pulling in different data to make their decision? I think getting that single source of truth, which is important, right, Paul? Yep. A single source of truth where we're all looking at the same thing and saying, clearly, this is not going to work. We need more resources. is important. And I don't know if you have that single source of truth.
So for me, scope is a huge deal, as you can imagine, right? We manage lots of complex projects. So a couple of things really help us. One, we try to visualize it beyond just, writing it all out. Oftentimes we'll put together a slide and it has an inner circle and then everything on the outside, right? And we will fill that inner circle with scope. And it starts to look like it's busting at the seams, or kind of conveying that we're getting full idea. But what I've found is probably more important is identifying the stuff on the outside, what's out of scope. Because more often than not, those are the things that start sparking a lot of questions. Well, I thought returning the equipment back to the manufacturer and getting our rebates on it was going to be part of what you guys had to do. And we're all about, the conversation, because that might mean, well, sure, but who's the engineer you want to give us to actually do that additional work, or let us continue, you start to have those conversations about if you're going to keep putting it back in, who's going to do it and how are you going to get there, right? And that's the advantage of having it on the outside. Even if ultimately it'll be on the inside. You're forcing the conversation about how to have it. So that's a big one for us, is really being as clear as possible on the out of scope stuff. Somebody thinks it's in scope if you don't say it.
Right.
Thank you, Paul and Kelly. I think that's really super important to have a clear boundary. What's in, what's not in.
Mm-hmm.
The next question is also related, and it talks about the top priorities. So let me read it for you both. What if your leadership is continually changing what the top priorities are, and so you are forced to put projects on hold and start new ones? How can you get them to stay committed to the priorities they set?
That's a fantastic question.
Yeah.
That's why I'm going to let Paul go first.
So we've run into this a couple of times, right? It's shiny object syndrome. It's squirrel, however you want to describe it, right? That everything is either a number one priority, or they're constantly putting the top five, what are the top five this week? We've really found that if you sort of force putting projects on hold requires work. And we're going to bundle up the work where it is, set it off to the side. But in order to do that, it's a week. It's, 40 hours, 20 hours, whatever is associated with kind of bundling it up, capturing where you are, making sure the budget was what it was, and setting it off. Because you're now starting to say, every time you have a brain fart about what's your number one priority, it's going to cost an additional project manager 20 hours and an engineer and a business analyst to sit down, tear this apart, and bundle it up for when you want to restart it. And that we found kind of puts a cost on this, keeping it steady. The other piece that I'm going to suggest is early on, we do guiding principles. How does senior leadership want us to manage this project? And we usually try to grab one for a budget issue, right? Or a priority issue, things like that captures from the leadership standpoint, their vision for this project, for its priority. And oftentimes we end up kind of throwing it back at them, right? Hey, you guys said this was number 2 project, had to get done, and here's why. And we're using that. So are you changing this guiding principle now on us? Do you want us to move it to 27, right? And every time they visualize that they're actively changing their mind, it starts to feel a little odd to most people if they're kind of flip-flopping, because you're calling their baby ugly without saying it's ugly, right? You're just sort of showing it.
Well, yeah. And the first thing I thought about was the expense of constantly changing your mind. It's so expensive to keep changing priorities. But as a PM, you're sort of at the whim. You don't have a lot of power and authority to interfere with this. And I would say if I was a PM and my project priority kept changing and stopping what I'm working on and going over here, I would very much line out what the impacts of stopping the project are and the costs. I would try to get something baked out that I could share before the decision was made, if I even got to help make that decision and have some influence there. But the bigger question is, what's going on with strategy? If they're changing projects, that means, is strategy changing? Probably not. Maybe it's just somebody's agenda that's coming into play, right? And again, that's kind of outside of our purview as project managers, but the things that you can do are to tee up something that involves the cost of delaying the project, putting the project off to the side, stopping it, and then starting again. And what is the cost of, starting up this new thing, and all of the level of effort it's going to take to get that into play.
Yep.
Thank you, Kelly and Paul. And then I missed to mention that this question was from Melinda. It was showing me anonymous attendee. So Melinda, hope you got your answer. Now I'm moving to the next question. And thank you, Susan, to typing it again. So this question is from Susan. I have a situation where many members of the group, including some leaders, don't think roles and responsibilities need to be established or communicated beyond a couple of high-level bullets. How do you suggest I explain the purpose and benefit of having R&R? I have tried, but the message isn't working.
Okay, so you've tried, Susan, so that's good. I'd be curious to know, what your message was, because I'm sure it was good. So why aren't they listening? And you're the PM, so you get to create roles and responsibility templates, right? That if they're not going to help you outline those, you can create a template for that. And I always have roles and responsibilities in my charter if I have one. And it's a part of my project plan. And I make sure that every stakeholder that has a major role in the project, that I have a conversation with them individually about what their role and responsibility is. And so they don't think it's important. I don't know why they wouldn't think it's important. Always letting them know too, if we don't establish this, here's the downstream impacts. We're going to have duplicated work. We're not going to have transparency. We're going to have rework, right? We're going to have lack of accountability. We're going to start experiencing all the dysfunctions of a team if we've not outlined our roles and responsibilities. And those are pretty big reasons to have them.
And I don't even think I can add to that, because if you have customers that really don't believe in roles and responsibilities, it sort of feels like they haven't bought off on a lot of the project management process, project management, contribution that we make. Kind of gets back to our, magic wand, feeling like we're just the administrative help, to schedule meetings. So I think, Kelly, you brought up some really good points.
Well, and Susan, I just want to mention Patrick Lencioni's book, 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. A lot of people have read it. And if you've read it, maybe read it again. It's got, the 5 dysfunctions, which if you have your sponsor and you want to get some buy-in for having some more robust roles and responsibilities and socializing those, bringing up those 5 dysfunctions as results of not having real roles and responsibilities are kind of insurance.
Good point.
Great. Thank you, Kelly and Paul, once again. Now moving to the last question, which I have. Nowadays, projects have a diverse team members. Does it make a project fail often?
Can you repeat that question?
So nowadays, projects have diverse team members.
Okay.
Does it make project fail often?
So does diversity in your team cause project failure?
Yeah.
I kind of find the exact opposite, right?
Me too.
I've got ideas coming from places that aren't like the ones that everybody else thought of. In fact, one of the surest ways I know to tank something is to have everybody believing and thinking the same way, right? You need to have people around you that will question your idea, your plan from a different perspective. And whether that's, from an engineering perspective, from a different country support perspective, from, different genders, whatever it is, they're bringing something to there that's just enough to go, if we tweak it, it gets better.
Yeah, diversity is something that's, I think, mandatory for success. And if there's project failure happening because of a diverse team, I would go right straight to the project manager and how are they managing the team? Because I think that would be the first kind of root cause if diversity is causing a failed project, right? It's something to be leveraged and promoted.
Right. Yeah. It's also a cultural thing, right? How is diversity celebrated within your organization? Because that's the thing that I think as project managers, we can promote and we can be part of it, starting at the project level, being inclusive in who we ask for to get on the team, right? If there are a couple of different choices for engineers, for whatever team members you have, pick your team of, and make sure they're different, right? Get those experiences, get those points of view that aren't yours. It's where we start, and it's where we can take the whole culture of the organization forward a step by step.
Totally agree. I think, yeah, totally agree. I think that's what diversity makes things beautiful. It makes us do innovation. So thank you, both of you, once again. So that's all I have right now for you. And thank you, attendees. Over to you, Kelly.
Thank you, Ravi. So we're gonna end our portion here with another poll. So that's only two. I think we did okay with just 2 polls. So Mike, can you bring up the last poll? And Paul and I are curious if there's something tonight that, was an aha or like, yeah, I need to get back to that. What's that one thing that you might want to implement in your current project that you learned from tonight's webinar? So maybe it's creating more meaningful success factors and getting away from those generic mundane ones. Maybe it's like Paul's been talking about, getting some better communication with your stakeholders, or proactively seeking out coaches and mentors, which, PMI is full. This chapter right here is full of some amazing coaches and mentors that I'm sure they would love to help you if you're looking for some help in that way. Or maybe you realize there's some professional development you need to advocate for yourself, some training. Or I know we all want that magic wand from Amazon. If I find them, I'll let you know. But Mike, what are the results of this thing?
What's the verdict?
Yeah. All right, create more meaningful success factors.
That's like, the magic wand did not win out. I love that it lost, because it means that people really do love what they're doing and want to make it better. So that's awesome.
Yeah.
We're not trying to just wave a silver bullet. Nice job.
There are no silver bullets, right, Paul?
That's it.
So thank you, everyone, for the gift of your time and your attention tonight. We want to give a great big shout out of gratitude to the PMI volunteers that put this whole thing together. Hosting these webinars is not an easy task. It takes a lot of volunteer time to launch these things. And so thank you. And also for Laura, for Ellen, Mauricio, and Dan, thank you for leaning into some vulnerability and sharing your project hell with us and your wisdom and insights. I know that I have some good takeaways from that too.
Yes. Thank you all. And, Kelly and I love connecting with project managers.
We do.
So please reach out to us if you like. You can get us either at our businesses, My Project Hell, LinkedIn. We're pretty much everywhere that we can be. And we'd love to have you join us for Coach's Corner if you want. So thank you all for joining us tonight and making this possible. I truly had fun. I hope that you guys did too for the last 90 minutes. So Kelly and I really just want to thank you.
Yeah. And hey, we had someone in the audience that works at Amazon. Maybe they can hook us up with the magic wand.
That's right. I saw that.
Cool. Thank you, everybody. We'll hand it back over to the very capable PMI team.
Well, hi, this is Jeff again, and I just want to mention the PDUs for tonight's event. It's 1.25 PDUs with a suggested mapping to the leadership talent triangle skill area. The PSPMI members who are registered for our meetings will have their PDUs entered automatically within 2 weeks of this meeting. However, non-members must manually report using the activity number, which is 2021-0518-01. And here, we just want to show PMI volunteers have fun. We have a lot of fun, and we always can use volunteers. It actually is fun and quite rewarding. So, we welcome you to become a volunteer and help us out and learn and meet people along the way. And now it's time for our raffle.
Awesome. And I am going to take over the screen
Okay.
for raffle now. So while we get our screen up here, we're going to have 4 lucky winners today. We're going to get some Amazon gift cards with which they can buy some wands if they'd like to. All right, so let's get started with our first winner. And yay, it's Tad. So Tad, please leave your email address in the chat below so that we can reach out to you and give you a gift card. And let's see who our second lucky winner is today. Then please leave your email address down below. Reach out to you. Yay. Now we have our third lucky winner, which is Suba.
Yay!
And now for our final winner for the night. It's Melinda.
Yay!
Again, thank you so much for joining and congratulations to all the winners. Please leave your emails in the chat window below and we will reach out to you. Have a good night. And now I am handing it back to Jeff.
Yay! Oops. There we go. And we're going to end up here with just a little information about the organization itself. You probably know PugetSoundPMI.org is our website, and you can also see our names for Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn. And we want to thank everybody for attending. It's been a great event. I enjoyed it. And the event is over. However, you are welcome to stay and talk, chat, listen, ask questions, do whatever you like. So thanks a lot for attending, everyone.